Wild day to say the least. I think it's important to go through this. We're looking at the NDX. Some people are saying it's an all-time high. We'll get to that in a second. But I do think it's important to just note a couple things. The reversal and then the gap up. What's the most important thing for us to take into account, in my opinion, is the size of not the gap, but the size of the bar during the day. And futures were all over the place. So I'm going to just use the market data. And I think it's more important to just use the market data right now, meaning when the market was open. And really have a move of 70 basis points since it opened. So you have a bunch of people that chased, and that's great. And it's great that we're up, and we are seeing some really good signs with rotation. Actually, the rotation in the NASDAQ was pretty important today. As always, subscribe to the channel, click all notifications. What we go over here is extremely timely. What I would say is this December 18th level right here on the SPX, you're clearly over that. You haven't come back. You have not tested this area. So before we get all giddy with ourselves, I do think it's important to just understand that, yep, we did gap up. Yep. It does look fairly decent. And yes, there are some things here that look really, really good. The RSI is starting to lift. It's starting to go back up. Take a look at this. McClellan summation, which we like to look at just to get an understanding of what's going on with the New York Stock Exchange. You are turning, again, off that zero line. Now, are you going to keep doing that and go higher? Eventually, this is going to pick a direction, and we want to know because that's really the best way to determine what the breadth of the underlying market is through the New York Stock Exchange. But we're going to have to see here. You know, I'm not always crazy about these days where you gap up like this, and I'll tell you why. Let's clean this off for a second. Actually, let's just drop down to here because you don't really have that oomph. Like if you gapped up and then you went, you have something. And I'll show you what I mean by this. Take a look at the NDX. The NDX, obviously, very clearly, here's the 18th. And then if we mark off the high from here, they're already out saying, oh, all-time highs. It was not. You missed it. You missed it by a couple points, but you did miss it. Are we going to get to all-time highs? You could, but you're not there. You flipped, and yeah, I get it. Everyone's excited. But when you dive into this and just look at it from like a 5-minute bar, yes, you had straight out buying all day, and then you kind of hit the end of the day here around that 2 o'clock level. And do you really go any higher from when institutions start getting involved? How about that last hour of the day, which is right around 3 o'clock? What happens? And I think it's important just to note that from 3 on, you had nothing but net sellers. So I don't know that you want to be getting too excited up here. It's good that we're going higher. It's good that they're blowing this off. I'd like to see a retest of this area and then go from there. The good signs that you're seeing, I'll show you a couple. And I do want to point out that what I'm showing you is actually from Monday. So today's going to be actually better. But you are seeing the 20, the 50, and the 200. They're all curling up. And these obviously are stocks above their respective moving averages on a percentage basis. This is the 5, the 20, the 50, and the 200. But Monday, they all did start curling up. And that's exactly what you want to see. I would think that the 200 day is clearly going to be above that 50 today. We're going to have to see it tomorrow by the time the data comes in. But I think it's important and I think it's good. So there are things here that are very good to see. What I really liked was the rotation, and we're going back and forth in a couple different sectors, but you are seeing some froth, and that is a concern. First, let's go through what I mean by rotation. So yesterday, it was all about the crowd. It was all about software. So yesterday, it was all about crowd and the breakout and the reversals, and that's exactly what we were looking for. Then we would go and say, we talked about this yesterday, PANW, all these names that were all running. Microsoft, which actually still lifted today. But we saw this rotation in the software, and there was still some love there. But you saw this whole rotation again, and it just flipped, and it went right back into semis that just ripped. Micron, and then you have NVIDIA, which is actually breaking out of that flag finally. And you're seeing these names, and they're being bought. Now, the difference here is they're actually being bought into the close. AVGO got an upgrade for a $400 target price, but that rotation was pretty clear today. If you took a look, and we'll clean all this off for a second, and we look at the SOX, and then from there, we'll go and take a look here, and you can see it. It's very clear. Watch this on a 5-minute chart. And this is exactly what you're looking for, because a healthy market rotates. It just does. It's exactly what you're looking for. You've seen this, and we went through this in some detail. And then we talked about yesterday how it flipped, and you can see where the red obviously was leading, which was cloud. And then you come in today, and now it's flipped back. This is super healthy, like super healthy. And it's exactly what you want to see. So is this good for the market? As a whole, yeah, it's very good for the market. The fact that you're pushing this way is exactly what you want to see. Let's go back to a basic chart and then go from there. But I can't stress this enough. I'd like it. I would have liked to see more follow through. Everyone will say to me, well, you should be happy that you have this gap. No, I'm not happy that you have the gap because people didn't participate in the gap. And that's why, hence they gap. And that's why gaps get what? Filled, because they don't have the support. I'd rather see it have come down, filled, and then rallied. But this is what we have. Now you're going into Micron, and Micron has earnings tomorrow night, and they're supposed to be fantastic. You're up a lot. You're up a lot. I mean, you're up 30 points on a $94 stock from last earning, which was a dumpster fire. Now we all know DRAM sales are probably going to go up through the roof. We know that the pricing is going up through the roof. So we're expecting this to be really good. How much is baked in remains to be seen. And I think it's super important to get this. Now, we are seeing some signs on the macro front as well. And we're seeing the treasuries, they're actually being bought, despite Powell being out there today. And I'm trying to give you charts versus giving you just the bare bones fluff of like news. He was on Capitol Hill today. They bought bonds. It's really that simple. Think about it that way. Go take a look at the dollar and what's going on there. Right? They're selling the dollar. Why? Because the tariff issue isn't. But the bottom line is they're starting to understand that he's not going to do anything with bonds. The other thing that's really going to help with bonds, and a lot of people are still missing this, they're not understanding why Coinbase is doing what it's doing. And we've been talking about this. We got into it on Saturday's video, and we've been talking about this for some time. This move that you're seeing in coin, in my opinion, I do think coin's going to continue to push. I actually, I don't really like to get into the hyperbole, but you're going to take out the highs. Like, you're going to take this out. It's just a matter of time. People need to really look at the stable coin and what's going on there. A lot of people are looking at this going, I'm not going to use it. No one cares what you're going to use. No one's paying attention. Sorry. What they're looking at is Amazon going to use it? Is Walmart going to use it? Or corporations going to come out with their own stable coins so they don't have to use Visa and MasterCard? You want the answer? The answer is yes, they are, because they're going to save billions and billions of dollars. You have Coinbase they are positioned perfectly for this. And that's why the stock is moving the way that it is. And that's why these stablecoin companies are moving the way that it is. I firmly believe this. So I have a position in it. We've had it in there for not a long time. I mean, less than a month at this point. Less than, well over a week, I think, at this point. But I think it's important to note, you have legs here. Now, people look at names like Circle, and I do want to go through these themes because I think it's very important. And yeah, this thing's way ahead of itself. How many publicly traded companies out there are doing stablecoins? How many? Like, there's not many. So if somebody wants exposure to one, well, this is the one. I mean, this is the one that they're going to do. And what I would say about this, instead of going out there and saying, oh, well, it's completely overdone, just use demarcation line, because you have no idea. And to sit down and say you're going to be able to fully value this thing makes zero sense. Your valuation, the way that you're going to create a valuation model, is not going to be any better than someone that's got billions and billions of dollars in assets, and the way that they're going to come up with one. So when these things come out and you look at them, just use demarcation lines. This is where we opened on Wednesday, the 18th. We rallied up. Someone would say left shoulder, head, right shoulder. If that's the case, and this is the neckline, the right shoulder is bigger than the left shoulder substantially, which means if it does break, this is going to be a bloodbath. That's usually what it means. And what you do is you would measure from the top of this. Let's get rid of the magnet for a second. You would measure from the top of this down, and you look at the percentage, and that's going to get you 29%. So then from the neckline, which I actually would argue it broke. The more I look at it, I don't know that I would argue that this is a left shoulder. I think what I would do, let's clean this off for a second. I think what I would do is I would say that that's your neckline. I think that's a cleaner neckline. And I would argue that it broke, which is why that 232 was such a pain in the butt today. That makes more sense. I'll show you that level in a second here. But that 232 is just such a pain today. And that makes more sense because it was the neckline. And you broke your neckline. That's interesting. So that's why I like doing these raw and unedited. I just think that there are way more information in them. But if you came here and you looked at that, okay, so that gets you 21.8. And you measure for the percentage. You don't measure for, when you measure for the percentage, not the points. And then you go to 21.8 and you're going to say, okay, that's going to get you to where? Right around here, 21.22, put you right around 182. By the time you got down there, you're probably right near that peak VWAP. And then you're already setting up some kind of divergence. And then you would just start looking at that on the hourly. Where does it go? Does it break? And you got a long way to go down. So I'm not going to sit here and get into the valuation of this. What I'm going to suggest is that on dips, I would be looking at buying this. It's just a function of where that winds up. And I don't have an answer to that. And stablecoins definitely is going to be 2025. I mean, there's no doubt about that this is going to continue to be the theme. And I see no reason for that to change. And if you are looking for who I think is going to be the behemoth, I think it's going to be Coinbase. I think that they're set up for that. I mean, the tokenization of equities, the whole thing. But Gemini is going to go public. When they go public, that'll be really interesting. But then you have these moves like we're watching these other guys come out and everyone's just blowing them off. And I do want to dive into the other thing that we're seeing here because it's actually rocking. You know, Chime, I think it was $27 that they IPO'd at. You can just see you're falling apart here. I wouldn't rule this out, but I do think what you want to do with these moves before you get invited or, into the party, as I like to say, the one thing you want to do before you accept that invitation is just put a little bit of an alert right there, right? And then just when it goes off, you'll be able to make a better decision. What is going on? Well, you're being squeezed in the market, but let's go through the secondary theme because there are some squeezes here that I think are pretty interesting. And I'm trying to capture as much of the themes of semis and the rotation, but you've got to look at like ARCX, for example, and this is hitting all-time high. Now, there's a couple others of these, and if you're in the community, you already know we've been talking about these for some time, but like ARCX, space exploration, innovation. I love when people like bash her. It just makes me laugh. But if you look at stuff like this, like UFO, okay, this is breaking out. Now, there's one called Jedi as well, and 20% of Jedi is actually RKLB and ASTO. Jedi. And this is another one I think you should be looking at. But these things, like, they're breaking out. They're not falling apart. They're breaking out. And that is really very important that people get. Like, this trade's not over. And I know people think it is, but you might be exhausted. You might pull back because that's kind of crazy, right? And what you do is you would just measure the move off of that. My target from this was 52.90. But if you were to measure this down from that low to here and then just do something as simplistic as grab, just very simple. All you're doing is just grabbing from the peak to the low. And you're going to get a fib. And that fib level from here, I think it's 52.80, 80, I had 89, it's 88. But it takes you right to where you are right there. And I have some exhaustive sell signs that came in today, so I did trim it. But that's the measured move on a fib level, and you hit it today. So does that mean you're going to stop? No, you could just flip it and go higher. But I do think that you're due for some kind of pullback. Are we seeing any signs of that? Not overly. I mean, you didn't really go anywhere from 130 on today. But if you look at the hourly, even here, and I think it's really important to get this, even though I think that you're showing signs of exhaustion. Here's the doji, flipped the doji and went up over. Now, if you undercut and drop back down to something, then yeah, you might be putting that formal top in and come down to something along the lines of like that 49 level. I do think that's a possibility, but there's way more names in here that I would be looking at. The other one that people keep talking about is that RKLB. There was some news on Tesla as well that we should talk about before the end of the day, but I really can't stress this enough. You need to start learning that coin story and stable coins and not be a curmudgeon. The one thing that I learned a long time ago, like a long back in the day, you want to be up on the biggest technologies. Whether you agree with them or not, it does not matter. It completely does not matter. But you see like RKLB, you're trying as well to break out. There's this other one that's part of that kind of trifecta in there, this B, I call it B-Sky, even though it's not, it's BKSY. And you can see how that is going as well. The other thing that you're seeing a lot of, and we started this whole conversation with froth. This kind of stuff, that's how we got on this topic. So and that's why I like doing these raw. But this kind of froth that you're seeing in the morning, man, you gotta be so careful, so careful. Here, I'll show you what I mean by this. So if you're looking at something like Circle in the morning and you're just watching these things just whack around, and this is like Friday's levels, right? And you can see how long these bars are and how easy they are to trade. And I just want to show you this because it does matter. Then you come in and then you go, okay, well, what about here? Well, look at Monday, for example, and look at these wicks and how wild they are. Like they're all over the place. Like you're literally, I was laughing when people were trying to trade this because it's a 1 minute bar that goes from 232 level that we just talked about all the way down to that 242 all the way up. So you have 1 minute and you move 10 points. It's wild. And if you're not used to this kind of stuff, it'll tear you apart. I'll show you GEV today as well, but you see how the patterns are changing? Like you're getting a lot more wicks and you're getting a lot more volatility like that. And you need to be really careful when you start seeing that stuff. This is what I was talking about, that risk. Say it, Matumbo, all the way in here. You definitely want to be super careful of that. Like really careful of that. I can't stress it enough, guys. Like when you see that volatility, it does raise my eyebrows. When I look at like this GEV today, this was something I bought and then I actually couldn't even get out of the darn thing, to be honest with you. But when I see something like this and then you watch these kinds of bounces and then you start coming all the way back down, this kind of movement, man, You get a 1 minute bar that goes from 512 to 500, and this all leads back to when I'm looking at the NDX and I understand the breadth and how and the sectors and everything. But that kind of move, that kind of volatility, it does raise some questions for me. Like when you see that, it can mean change in trend. You have some really good signs here for the market. You also have some things that are scaring me. But I will say this, they are squeezing the shorts really well, and they are trying to get out of this. There's still millions short. It flipped yesterday. I posted this in the community, and I just didn't really follow up on it too much because there was so much else going on to make money off of. But if you went back here, and we just went back 12 months, this hit everyone's 52-week high list the other day or on Friday, and then they come into Monday and they have their follow through, and then they get their squeeze. Now you're probably a little exhausted. But overall, I think the market looks fairly decent here for these kinds of names. Maybe you get a pullback, maybe you don't, but I wouldn't sleep on this. Tesla, you're seeing a lot here, even after hours. And when you see these kind of movements, don't sleep on them. I'm going to show you this. Now, in front of you is Tesla. And on Tesla, there is a pattern. And the pattern that you're seeing is Marbuzu black or Marbuzu white. And the way I have this set up, this application is just to show me just those candlesticks when they're exact. And you'll see that you have them in here and here as well. What I would say to you when you see these, there's certain specific patterns that you'll see, and then they'll obviously have follow through or they won't. What you are looking for is a pattern within that pattern. So in other words, when are these most effective? These Marbuzu whites or Marbuzu blacks? Like, why did this one not work? And why did this one kind of work? Why did this one definitely work? I'm going to show you why this one definitely worked. You see that undercut of that bar? And this is really important. And I'm trying to tie lessons in. You guys can comment on this. Once a week, I'm going to start trying to not only tie lessons in this, but do more just general stocks, more micro than macro. I think it'd be really helpful for themes. See that undercut right there? And then you get that bar. So if you have an undercut on a white or an overcut on a black, you want to pay attention to that. So if you have an undercut on a white or you have an overcut on a black, you want to pay attention to that. I can't stress that enough. So when you have something like this up here and you're pushing, right? Do you have an undercut? No, you have the exact opposite. That's why this thing was pretty much dead in the water. There's some other stuff here that we could get into with like the RSI. But this bar here, right here, was a Marbuzu block today. It was technical and it was there. And the problem with this bar is it didn't have the overbite that you want, but it was darn close to it. I'd be real careful of this tomorrow of Tesla. I know a lot of people are like, oh, I'm going to play the bounce because they had that great robo-taxi day. There's stuff all over the internet where they're starting to show that this car might have actually been driven. They have issues already with the TSLA or whatever 5 or 6 letter department, and then one with Texas as well. You can see very clearly here today that it was just dump and get me out. I don't want to be in this. From our level right here, that 44, which was supposed to hold, it didn't, it broke. At the time of recording this, I'm not short. I was short for the day and not up here either. Once it broke that level, that was it. I really think that you have to do a retest of this 332 level. And I do want to say something. If you are in trying to get into the room and you are on the wait list, please look for the invitation from the wait list. If you're trying to get on the wait list, link will be in description and pinned, because I'm going to send out invitations and then it's going to be closed for a longer duration of time just because we're getting too busy and we're getting too many people in. And I talk to everybody that joins. That is it.